Hello, here I am again in the name of the sovereign creator of heaven and earth, the Lord Jesus Christ. We're continuing with the chronology of the life of Christ. We have come now to Decapolis, that's just after the Syrophoenician woman. We find this only in Matthew and Mark. I'll read them in that order. First, Matthew 15, verses 29 to 31. Moving on from there, Jesus went alongside the Sea of Galilee, and going up on the mountain, he sat down there, and large crowds approached him, having with them lame, blind, mute, maimed, and many others, and they placed them at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. So the crowds marveled, seeing mute speaking, maimed made whole, maimed made whole, lame walking, and blind seeing, and they kept glorifying the God of Israel. I just want to mention here that this was on the eastern side of the sea, Decapolis. So the people, the public would be different than what was usually had on the other side, Capernaum and so on. Now I'll read the parallel account in Mark. It's chapter 7, 31 through 37. Again, departing from the region of Tyre and Sidon, Jesus came to the Sea of Galilee by the way of the Decapolis region. Then they brought to him a deaf man with thick speech and begged him to place his hand on him. After taking him aside, away from the crowd, he put his fingers in his ears. He also spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephatha, that is, be opened. Immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he began to speak clearly. Then he commanded them that they should tell no one, but the more he would command them so much, the more they would proclaim it. People were astonished beyond measure, saying, he has done everything well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. A couple things here. As I've already mentioned, the Lord chose a roundabout way, maybe to stay out of sight a little bit more. People wouldn't know him so well. Anyway, this deaf man with thick speech is interesting. We learn to speak by imitating what we hear. So a deaf person will not speak correctly, even if there is nothing wrong with his tongue. But in this case, the following verses indicate that there was also a problem with the tongue. If the man had never learned to speak correctly, this would be a further miracle. We learn by hearing, all right? Dear me. Fingers in the ears. He spat. Oh, wow. The Lord seems to have varied his procedure on purpose. He could heal ears without using his fingers. He could heal a tongue without spittle, but he just did things differently, obviously on purpose. He kept telling the people not to talk about it, but it wasn't any good. The news was so good they just couldn't contain it. I agree with them. I probably would have spread it as well. Now we come to the bread for 4,000 men. This is still also in Matthew and Mark, which I will read again in that order. First Matthew 15, verses 32 through 39. Then Jesus summoned his disciples and said, I have compassion on the crowd because they have already remained with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. So his disciples say to him, where could we get in an uninhabited place enough bread so as to satisfy such a great crowd? Jesus says to them, how many loaves do you have? They said, 7 and a few small fish. So he commanded the crowds to recline on the ground, and taking the 7 loaves and the fish, he gave thanks, broke, and gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the crowd. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 7 hampers full of the fragments that remained. Now those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And having dismissed the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magdala. I just wanted to comment a few things here at the end. Much of what I said about the feeding the 5,000, you can repeat it here. Very similar situation. Again, where did the hampers come from? Well, probably there were some fishing boats that stopped by. I don't know. And again, like with the 5,000, it was 5,000 men plus women and children, 4,000 men plus there were probably around 10,000 people by the time you add the women and the children. Now it says here in verse 39, he got into the boat. Well, they'd been there several days, all right, so presumably Jesus had sent someone to get Peter's boat. There's plenty of time. Someone could have gone on foot, but it came to that. Okay, let's now go and read the same passage in Mark 8, verses 1 through 10. In those days, the multitude became very large, and not having anything to eat, Jesus called his disciples and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude because they have stayed with me 3 days now and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will give out on the way because some of them have come a long distance. His disciples answered, oh, from what source could anyone satisfy these people with bread here in a wilderness? He asked them, well, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. So he told the crowd to sit down on the ground, and taking the 7 loaves and giving thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before the crowd, and they did. They also had a few small fish, but he said to distribute them as well. Well, they ate and were filled. They even took up 7 hampers of broken pieces that were left over. Now those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away. Then he got right into the boat with his disciples and went to the region of Dalmanutha. Now, the reaction of the disciples here, they'd obviously already forgotten about the 5,000, but if we'd been there, we'd probably have forgotten as well. But what I want to comment here is that at the end of Mark, it talked about the region of Magdala, whereas here we have Dalmanutha. But I really have to say something more about Magdala. I should have said it before. Magdala was Mary Magdalene's hometown. Perhaps this was when Jesus delivered her from the demons. That's in Mark 16, verse 9. However, less than 0.5%, less than 0.5 of the Greek manuscripts of objectively inferior quality, I can prove that, read Magadan instead of Magdala, as in NIV, NASB, Living Bible, TV, and so on. Oh dear. The parallel passage that I've just said has the region of Dalmanutha. I imagine that Magdala was the town in the region of Dalmanutha. Okay. Now, Dalmanutha is below Capernaum on the western side of the Sea of Galilee, so therefore, obviously, the feeding of the 4,000 was on the other side in Decapolis, as we've already seen. Now, we'll keep right on going, still with Matthew and Mark, and again, I will read them in that order. First, Matthew 16, verses 1 through 4. The Pharisees and Sadducees came, and testing him, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. But in answer, he said to them, when it is evening, you say, fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, today will be stormy, for the sky is red and overcast. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the sky, but cannot discern the signs of the times. A malignant and adulterous generation seeks a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And leaving them behind, he went away. A couple things here. Pharisees and Sadducees. Well, they were theological enemies. They didn't get along well. But here they joined forces against Jesus. He was perceived to be the common enemy, evidently. Again, at the end of verse, well, not at the end, but in verse 2, we have this another problem. 3% of the Greek manuscripts omit hypocrites, as in most other verses. You stay with hypocrites. It's like well, they want a sign, and Jesus isn't about to go along with that. He says it's a malignant and adulterous generation. No sign except the sign of the prophet Jonah. You can remember what was said in Matthew 12, 39 and 30 and 40 about that. But no, he just goes away. He left by boat, as we'll see in Mark. Jesus simply did not want to waste time with them. He calls them malignant. That is, they were aggressively evil. Never Jesus made an attempt to pacify the Pharisees in this guy. Never. Now let's read Mark 8, verses 11 through 13. The Pharisees came out and began to argue with him, requesting of him a sign from heaven by way of testing him. But he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? I tell you emphatically, no sign shall be given to this generation." Turning his back on them, he went back into the boat and went off to the other side. You get the impression that the Pharisees didn't let Jesus get very far from the boat, so they went out to get him. I wonder if Satan was concerned to protect Dalmanutha. I don't know just how that was. Anyway, Jesus got right back in the boat and went our way to Capernaum, I think it was. Anyway, let's go on now. And the Lord is going to talk about the Pharisees' leaven. This is still Matthew and Mark. Again, I'll read them in that order. Matthew 16, verses 5 through 12. Upon arriving at the other side, his disciples had forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus said to them, "Watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." So they reasoned among themselves, saying, "It's because we didn't bring any bread." But Jesus, being aware, said to them, "You little faiths, why are you reasoning among yourselves because you didn't bring any bread? Do you not yet perceive nor remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up, nor the 7 loaves of the 4,000 and how many hampers you took up? How come you don't perceive that it wasn't about bread that I told you to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees?" Then they understood that he did not say to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees. For more about the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees, you can see in Luke chapter 12, verse 1 at your leisure. I won't read it here. Let's go on to Mark 8, verses 14 through 21. His disciples had forgotten to take bread. They did not have more than 1 loaf with them in the boat. And he charged them, saying, "Watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." So they started reasoning among themselves, saying, "It's because we have no bread." Being aware of it, Jesus said to them, "Why are you reasoning because you have no bread? Do you still neither perceive nor understand? Do you still have hearts that have been hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? Having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of pieces did you take up?" And they say, 12. And when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many hampers full of pieces did you take up? And they said, 7. So he said to them, how is it that you still don't understand? Okay, let's have a look here. Just like with the feeding of the 5,000, they didn't keep the 12 baskets. Here, they didn't keep the 7 hampers either. Apparently, it was the owners of the hampers got the leftovers. Same business. Therefore, they didn't have any of that leftover bread for themselves. Now here, Jesus mentions the leaven of Herod, not just the Pharisee, but Herod. The point would be that they're two different leavens, which means the doctrine, as we've already seen. Now, in verse 17, he says, have your ears, or rather, your hearts have been hardened. And then the verb is in the passive voice. So I ask, who did the hardening? Who hardened their hearts? I don't have an answer. Now, obviously, the Lord was just a little bit disappointed, tired. How is it you still don't understand? Well, it's easy for us to criticize those disciples as slow learners, but and really, the Lord was evidently unhappy with them. But I wonder if we would do it, if we would have done any better if we were there. Probably not. Now, we come to Bethsaida. That's apparently where they went after they left Dalmanutha. This is only in Mark 8, verses 22 through 26. Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Then spitting into his eyes and laying hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. Looking up, he said, I do see men, only they look like walking trees. Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up, and he was restored and saw everyone clearly. Then he sent him away to his house, saying, neither go into the village nor tell anyone in the village. Just a couple of things here. Again, this, he spit in his eye. I thought, oh dear me, isn't that rather unsanitary? Although, of course, Jesus wasn't asking our opinion. He had a variety of procedures. And in this case, he did it in 2 stages. This was unusual. Usually it's just automatic or all at once. But here, in fact, he used 2 stages. Now, that the man said that they looked like trees, obviously he had not been born blind, because he knew what trees looked like and what men looked like. Now, just to finish this video, I have to comment one more of these unhappy little bits, but I take it that the man did not live in that village in Bethsaida. So the Lord tells them to go directly home and not to go into that village or to tell anyone there. Unfortunately, half of 1% of the Greek manuscripts of objectively inferior quality omit nor tell anyone, to be followed by the modern versions. You know that story. Sorry, I have to end on a sour note. But anyway, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching, and God bless.